Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to step away from the battles of the Civil War and do something a little different. We're going to talk about one of the famous people from the Civil War, PGT Beauregard. Our focus today will be on before and after the war, since we'll be covering his actions during the Civil War during our actual future videos. Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard was born on May 28, 1818, and passed away on February 20, 1893. From this point on, we'll refer to General Beauregard as GT, as that's how he referred to himself in writings. GT was born at the Contreras sugarcane plantation in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana, outside of New Orleans, to a French Creole family. GT was the third child of Helene Judith de Rigaud and Jacques Toutant Beauregard. He had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He attended the United States Military Academy at West Point in New York. When he arrived, GT dropped the hyphen from his last name and treated Toutant as a middle name in order to fit in better with his classmates. Upon his graduation, GT was married twice in his life. Shortly after his graduation in 1841, GT married Marie Antoinette Laure Valère, the daughter of a sugarcane planter and member of one of the most prominent French Creole families in southern Louisiana. During their 9-year marriage, they had 3 children, Renee, Henry, and Laura. Marie died in March 1850 while giving birth to Laura. 10 years later, the widower GT married Caroline Deslon, the daughter of another sugarcane planter from St. James Parish. Caroline was the sister-in-law of John Slidell, a U.S. Senator from Louisiana and later a Confederate diplomat. She died in New Orleans on March 1864 when it was under Union occupation. GT's first major posting was during the Mexican-American War with the U.S. Army. There, he served as an engineer under General Winfield Scott. During the Battle of Chapultepec, he was wounded twice, once in the shoulder and the other in the thigh. Upon GT's return from Mexico in 1848, and for the next 12 years, he was placed in charge of the engineer department called the Mississippi and Lake Defenses in Louisiana. He spent much of his time performing engineering work, repairing old forts and building new ones. During his service after the Mexican-American War, GT became dissatisfied as a peacetime officer. He informed the U.S. Army late in 1856 that he was going to join William Walker, who had seized control of Nicaragua. William Walker had offered GT the rank of second in command of the Army. However, senior officers, including General-in-Chief Winfield Scott, convinced GT to stay in the United States. Employing the political influence of his brother-in-law, John Slidell, GT obtained an appointment as superintendent of the U.S. Military Academy on January 23, 1861. His orders were revoked and he relinquished the office after only 5 days when Louisiana seceded from the Union. After the war, GT did not want to seek amnesty as a former Confederate officer by publicly swearing an oath of loyalty, but both General Lee and Johnston counseled him to do so, and he eventually did. He did this before the mayor of New Orleans on September 16, 1865, and he was one of the many Confederate officers issued a mass pardon by President Andrew Johnson on July 4, 1868. His final privilege as an American citizen, the right to run for public office, was restored when he petitioned the Congress for relief, and the bill on his behalf was signed by President Grant on July 24, 1876. GT had pursued a position with the Brazilian Army in 1865, but he declined the Brazilians' final offer after considering it for some time. He claimed that the positive attitude of President Johnson towards the South swayed his decision. He said, and I quote, "I prefer to live here poor and forgotten than to be endowed with honor and riches in a foreign country." He had also declined offers to take command of the armies of Romania and Egypt. As a lifelong Democrat, GT worked to replace Republican rule during Reconstruction. In addition, GT served as president of the Great Northern Railroad before a hostile takeover removed him from that position a couple years later. GT and former Confederate General Jubal Early were asked in 1877 by the Louisiana Lottery to preside over lottery drawings. The general served in these positions until the lottery was shut down 15 years later. GT's military writings and partnerships included writing The Principle and Maxims of the Art of War, Report on the Defense of Charleston, a commentary on the campaign and Battle of Manassas, the military operations of General Beauregard in the war between the states, and he also contributed the article The Battle Bull Run to Century Illustrated Monthly Magazine in November of 1884. During these years, GT and Jefferson Davis published a series of bitter accusations and counter-accusations, retrospectively blaming each other for the Confederate defeat. When Jefferson Davis died in 1889, GT refused the honor of heading the funeral procession. He said, and I quote, "We have always been enemies. I cannot pretend I am sorry he is gone. I am no hypocrite." GT died in his sleep in New Orleans. The cause of his death was heart disease and aortic insufficiency. Edmund Kirby Smith, the last surviving full general of the Confederacy, served as the chief mourner for GT as he was interred in the vault of the Army of Tennessee in historic Metairie Cemetery in 1893. Well, that's it, folks. Our special on PGT Beauregard. Please join us next week when we join the First Battle of Manassas, otherwise known as the First Battle Bull Run.